Nick and Laura were coming back home for the birth of their child, and Antonio made it clear that I needed to leave. Leave me? I asked, stunned. Antonio nodded with a smile. I've always thought things would be better without you. I hate how you always have the right arguments. Just because we've been together for so long doesn't mean we have to stay together. His words were bold and cut deep. Whatever difficulties he faces from now on are none of my concern. He probably thinks he'll forget about it after a good night's sleep, but not this time. He should take responsibility for his own words. I'm Scarlett, 55 years old, living with my husband Antonio, who is 60. Antonio recently retired, 5 years my senior. Maybe I'll spend my time enjoying my fishing hobby now, he said, sounding happy. Meanwhile, I run a small but profitable apparel company which allows us to live in a high-rent condominium. Initially, Antonio was supportive, but after his retirement, he changed. His daily routine shifted drastically. Always at home, he spent many days without plans, leading to a lax lifestyle. Staying up late watching TV or sleeping past noon became the norm. I suggested, shouldn't you keep a regular schedule, especially at your age? But Antonio was unconcerned. I've worked hard all my life. Let me be, don't tell me what to do, he retorted. Another issue was Antonio's boredom. He had few friends and his only hobby was fishing alone. He seemed increasingly idle after retiring and began nitpicking at my housekeeping. Frankly, I'm not great at domestic chores. Busy with work, I rely heavily on the latest home appliances, a cleaning robot and electric cookers. Antonio didn't like that. Robots can't clean every nook and cranny. Doing it by hand is more thorough, he insisted. One evening, he complained about dinner. Stews need time and attention, not an electric cooker, he grumbled, though he had never minded before. Now, he was imposing his preferences. At worst, he would say, stop being lazy. You're so sloppy. I'd consider his request if I had the time. I'm too busy with work. If he's retired and has time, he should do it. When I pointed this out, he snapped, just because you work doesn't mean you can act superior. I began to understand why some people divorce later in life, yet I endured, considering how hard we had worked together. But things escalated due to a particular event. Our son's wife's pregnancy. Nick, our only son, and his wife Laura announced her pregnancy. Nick isn't my biological son. He's Antonio's from a previous marriage. We remarried when Nick was 10. Antonio was ecstatic about the pregnancy announcement. Our first grandchild, he exclaimed, his joy overwhelming. Yes, it's exciting, I replied, happy too. But Antonio's joy was beyond normal. I think he was experiencing grandparent fever. That's why things turned out this way. Laura, who was raised by a single mother, expressed a desire to return home for the birth, probably influenced by Antonio's enthusiasm. My mom is too busy with work, Laura explained, which only fueled Antonio's eagerness. We need to welcome the baby in the best possible way, he declared, diving into preparations with gusto. That would have been fine, except he imposed all the tasks on me. This crib, every kind of milk, just in case, and a lot of diapers, he barked, overwhelming me with orders. Already swamped with work and chores, I struggled to meet his endless demands, only to be met with criticism. No, not like that, he complained. No, you're doing it wrong. Enough. I finally snapped. I understand you're excited, but do it yourself. Stop relying on me for everything. Antonio seemed shocked, standing frozen. Our first grandchild, and you act so detached. Right, you're not biologically related to Nick, so you don't care about him. That's not true. Don't say such awful things, I retorted. You're overdoing it. If Laura knew how much you're doing, she might not want to come here. This place doesn't feel relaxing. Antonio, unable to respond, clenched his teeth and retreated to his room. I sighed, regretting my harsh words. His fanaticism had driven me to stubbornness, and being accused of not caring about Nick hurt deeply. I wanted Nick and Laura to feel relaxed here, which is why I needed to stop Antonio's excesses. Later, I thought about making amends, but Antonio didn't come out of his room. Reluctantly, I knocked on the door. I'm sorry about yesterday. I'm going to work, I said, leaving for the day. At work, I faced numerous challenges and returned home quite late. As I contemplated dinner, I found Antonio already sitting at the dining table. I'm home. Sorry I'm late. I'll make dinner as quickly as I can, I said, but there was no reply. Antonio just sat there staring, as if pressuring me. Frustrated, I thought, if he's home anyway, he could have made dinner or at least not rushed me like this. Finally, I broke down. I managed to make crispy fish sandwiches and served them. Sorry for the wait. Let's eat. Antonio immediately started eating in silence. Were you that hungry? I asked as I sat down and began my own sandwich. Before I was even halfway through, Antonio had finished. He sat up straight and looked at me. What? I asked. Antonio spoke in a low voice. You're all about work, neglecting the housework. His unexpected words nearly made me drop my sandwich. What are you talking about? I'm not neglecting anything. Don't act like it's nothing. Like today, just sandwiches, no salad or soup. That's unacceptable. True, I usually serve salad and soup, but today wasn't about being lazy. I hurried because Antonio seemed so eager to eat. I explained, but Antonio wasn't convinced. It's not just that. You always negate everything I say or do. You must think you're better because you're working and I'm retired. That's not how I think at all, I insisted, but Antonio remained unconvinced. I was getting tired of this pointless argument. Let's stop this. We'll be welcoming Nick and his wife soon. I don't want to greet them with this unpleasant atmosphere. At this, Antonio sneered sarcastically. All right, I've been thinking the same. So I found a good solution. A good solution. I tilted my head, puzzled. Antonio declared loudly, Nick and Laura are coming back for the birth, so you should leave. What? I couldn't believe he was serious. Leave me? When I asked again, Antonio nodded with a smile. If you weren't here, things would go smoothly. I've always thought so. I hate people like you who always argue with logic. There are plenty of other women. I was shocked. After decades of marriage, hearing such words was devastating. Antonio, carried away, continued to vent his grievances. You lack respect for me, your husband, always complaining, never just listening. Complaining? I respect your requests as much as I can. It's you who makes unreasonable demands. Oh, shut up. I hate your bossy tone. Just leave. I don't even want to see your face. Antonio slammed the table. It was futile to say more. Understood, I said and returned to my room. The next morning, I packed my things and left. I called the moving company immediately after being treated like that. I wasn't going to stay. Fortunately, it wasn't moving season, and I easily scheduled an estimate. I hoped to finish everything while Antonio was out, but he was almost always home. I was worried, but then it seemed like fate intervened. I'm going out tomorrow for a bit, Antonio said. He was the type to forget things overnight, so he spoke to me quite normally. Apparently, he had been invited by his fishing buddies for an overnight trip. This was my chance. There was a slightly awkward atmosphere. Maybe even Antonio felt that what he said yesterday was too much. Still, there was no apology from him. He might have been hoping to act as if yesterday's words never happened. He's always been like that. Until now, I've been the bigger person, letting things go, but I couldn't just ignore what he said this time. The moving estimate came quickly. I planned to take all the furniture and appliances, but there was less than I thought. The problem was finding a place to move to, but that was easily solved. Someone I knew through work offered to lend me a place, a brand new one, no less. Are you sure? I asked again, and they said, Scarlett, you've been so helpful. So, I accepted the offer and immediately went to see the property. It was more than sufficient, with no issues. I moved everything out while Antonio was away. His harsh words left me without regrets. Perhaps deep down, I had grown tired of life with Antonio. The night after I moved, Antonio called. Here it comes, I thought, and answered the phone. Hello. Hey, Scarlett, what's going on? Antonio sounded panicked even over the phone. I almost laughed but responded calmly. What do you mean? My house? It's empty. What's happening? Well, you told me to leave, so I did just that. I took everything from the latest appliances to my favorite dining table. But I only told you to leave. It's crazy to take everything from someone's house. Leaving them would be crazy. I bought all that with my own money. You never contributed, saying you didn't need them. I reminded him. Antonio fell silent, then grudgingly said, Fine, Nick and his family are coming tomorrow. Furniture doesn't matter. He'd be surprised to see the place now. Good, then it's perfect timing. Say hi to Nick for me. There was no point in further conversation, so I quickly ended the call. There was another significant matter, but I didn't mention it since Antonio seemed unaware. The next day, Nick called. We'll be there soon. Didn't Antonio tell you I moved out? Really? Nick sounded surprised but didn't press further. In fact, I sensed more relief than shock in his voice. Cool. Mom's not there. We can do whatever we want then. You're not coming back, right? That's right. I always sensed Nick found me bothersome. He seemed displeased that I didn't pamper him like a biological mother might. You're not as kind as other women, he once said as a child. I thought I was raising him with love so he wouldn't struggle later in life. Well, it's easier for both of us. Laura was uncomfortable too, so see you. That was like his father, always adding one extra unnecessary comment. I pondered this after hanging up. That day, I was a bit on edge, unable to focus on work. I half expected a call about the furniture and appliances. Laura once said, "It must be nice to have all these appliances for an easy life." I secretly thought their visit was to take advantage of that, but contrary to my expectations, no call came that day. Finally, at the end of the month, Antonio called. "Ah, Scarlett." His voice lacked confidence, making his intention clear, but I played ignorant. "Yes? It's about the rent." "Yes, what about it?" He struggled to say it, but he wanted to talk about the rent. Antonio and I used to pay $1,700 for the condo rent together, but now he was on his own. I was the one who paid all the rent. There was no way Antonio, with his retirement, could afford it. He might manage for a while with his retirement fund, but it would eventually run out. When he called, he hesitated to speak his mind. I had to prompt him. "You're not expecting me to pay the rent for a condo I don't even live in, are you?" No, that's not. You were the one who insisted I leave, right? And now you're coming back to me?" That wasn't something Antonio's pride would allow. As expected, he changed the subject. "Scarlett, are you doing okay? You know, with a place to live?" "Yes, I managed to find a place thanks to some connections. I'm living comfortably." This left no room for him to ask me to return. I had no intention of going back, but just in case. "Oh, okay. Nick and Laura were saying they miss you. I thought maybe you'd consider coming back." Such words were unusual for Antonio. He must have been really desperate, but I had no intention of returning. "Oh, really? I thought they disliked me." No, that's not. Well, it doesn't matter. I have something important to discuss, so I'll come over." Yes, Antonio replied, sounding cheerful. There was a vital matter to discuss for my future. Later, I visited the condo for the first time in a while. "Long time no see," Antonio greeted, dressed up unnecessarily. No matter how much he dressed up, it was pointless. I walked down the hall into the living room where Nick and Laura were sitting. Clearly, they couldn't live with nothing. New sofas, tables, and a fridge were installed. Nick waved casually, and Laura, though glaring, greeted me. The atmosphere was tense. I wanted to finish what I came for and leave. I sat down as Antonio urged. "So, what did you want to talk about?" Grateful he brought it up, I started the conversation. I thought it was better to handle this sort of thing sooner rather than later. Antonio turned pale the moment he saw what I held out. "You're planning to divorce me?" he asked, visibly shaking as he looked at the filled-out divorce papers. "Yes. Ever since you told me to leave, I've been intending to." "Did you really say that without thinking?" Antonio fell silent. He probably did. He tends to blurt out things in the heat of the moment without thinking ahead. This habit had caused him trouble at work several times. "The last time, you said all those terrible things. I don't want to see your face. There are other women, and more." At that moment, I couldn't see a future with you anymore. He must have remembered saying those things. Antonio kept his head down, sweating. "Yeah, I said it, but that was not really what I meant." "You can say such things even if they're not in your heart." I'm appalled. "Well, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I can't do this anymore." Facing Antonio, our eyes met. He immediately flinched and looked away. "Can't you reconsider? We've come so far together." "I've come this far only to be told such things. I can't do this anymore. I can't be with you." As I firmly stated this, Antonio let out a long sigh. The room was enveloped in a painfully awkward silence, broken surprisingly by Laura. "Excuse me, I'm the one who's been most inconvenienced here." I turned to Laura, tilting my head, and she glared at me with eyes full of resentment. "What do you mean?" "I thought this place would be perfect with Scarlett around, clean and full of the latest appliances. I came here expecting to be pampered, but instead, I'm caught up in this marital mess. It's a huge nuisance." Laura sighed even louder than Antonio had earlier. She was angry with me for not meeting her expectations of a princess-like pampering. That is a huge misunderstanding. If you're unhappy, you could go back to your own home or anywhere else. But you chose to stay here. When I said this, Laura's face turned red with anger.